Hello folks, this is Sullla here once again. What we're going to be doing here today is we're going to be taking a look at some of the pictures that I took when I was traveling for 2 weeks at the beginning of July. There were a fair number of requests. People wanted to see where I had gone and a little bit about where I had been traveling. So that's what I'm going to try to do in this video. I have quite a few pictures. Obviously, I have well over 1,000 photos from 2 weeks of travel. That means it's probably too long to put in one video. I'll probably put it into two parts. We'll see, because the trip kind of was divided into two parts. This is where I store my pictures on my computer, so there's a whole bunch of different categories. And this trip right here was the one that I did this particular year to Canada this year in 2013, if you're watching this as the video was published. And then these are smaller folders showing where I went, and we'll get to them in a minute. A couple words first, though, about traveling with me. I do vacations to try and see new things I haven't seen before. I generally don't do the vacations where you go to a beach and you just relax for, a week or so. There's nothing wrong with that. That can be a really nice vacation. But while I'm still relatively young, I would prefer to do trips that, I don't know, cover more ground, are more adventuresome, just because I feel like as you get older, and you're not able to travel as much, you're more looking for sort of the relaxing type thing. But everybody wants different things. My best friend, he and his wife, when they went on vacation, they just went for a really relaxing trip and they had a great time. So it depends on what you're looking for. But typically, I am looking to try to see as much as possible. I travel very hard. I'd set a very demanding pace, particularly when I'm traveling by myself, as I did on this trip. Most people would probably consider what I do to be a murderous pace in terms of travel, in terms of trying to see and cram in as much as possible in as short a time as possible. I don't have a ton of money. I know that this is shocking that people who are graduate students, people who teach at universities generally, are not flush with cash, so I don't have a ton of money. What that means is I travel very inexpensively, try to see as much as possible, and as I said, set a very demanding pace. On this particular trip, I drove 5,000 miles in 15 days. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It was 5,000 miles in 15 days. I'm pretty good at driving. Driving long distances doesn't bother me at all. When I was a little kid, my parents would take me and my brother, and we would drive from where we lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and we would go down to visit our grandmother who lived in Florida. And we would do that drive, not every year, but like every other year. And it was like a 13 to 14 hour drive. So from a young age, we did like these really long car trips, and we kind of got used to it. This is when, of course, there wasn't a DVD player in your minivan or whatever. So long trips don't bother me. And we'll go through and see some of the locations I went to. Anyway, I've also got Google Maps queued up here. I can show some of the places that I went. So the idea behind this trip, I'll go ahead and scroll up here. The idea behind this trip was to try and see parts of Canada that I had not gone to before. The Canadian heartland here is sort of the focus of the first week. Your Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, going through that part of sort of Canada where most people live in the St. Lawrence Valley. I had done a previous trip to Canada 3 years ago when I went through Maritime Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. I saw all of them before, so I wanted to expand the trip to see the rest of sort of Eastern Canada in the St. Lawrence. And I also wanted to go, and the second week of the trip is traveling to Newfoundland and also traveling, for one day at least, up to Labrador, which is pretty far out there. And it's not cheap getting up there, as you'll see, but makes for quite a trip, certainly, because not many people have been to Newfoundland, and particularly fewer people have driven to Newfoundland, not taken a plane there. So in any case, on this first day, we'll go through. The first thing that I did was I live in Maryland. I live between Baltimore and Washington and in Maryland. And the first thing I had to do was, well, drive up there because this trip was entirely done by car. And so the first thing was to get a rental car, which I did. My car is very old. It has over 100,000 miles on it. So I did not want to take my car on this trip. It probably would not have done the hard driving. So went ahead and rented a car. So here it is, a little Ford Focus 2013. Very nice little car. and went ahead and drove. So the trip up from the Baltimore areas, you take I-83, you go up through Harrisburg, you travel up through up through central Pennsylvania where there's pretty much nothing, and anyway you come up here and you drive past Buffalo, and then go to Niagara. So my first day was Niagara Falls because I needed to spend half the day driving anyway, and it's a nice convenient place to stop and then pass on to Toronto the next day. So these pictures are from the Niagara Falls region. Anyway, I'll zoom in here so you can see the pictures and then run through them on the slideshow. Anyway, there's the car, and there is the mileage. I took this picture so I could see what the mileage was on the car. 6423 on the odometer when I started. And at the end, you can see what that compares to. Okay, so Niagara Falls, or going up to Niagara Falls. And I've been to Niagara Falls before. I was in Niagara Falls 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago. My family took us there in 1993 when I was 10 years old. So it was interesting to see what was the same and what had changed in the last 20 years. Anyway, so the first place to stop was here at Niagara Falls State Park. This is on the American side of the falls. This is on Goat Island. The falls are there. For those who haven't been to Niagara Falls before, there are basically two sets of falls. There's the American or Bridal Veil Falls here, and then there's the Horseshoe or Canadian Falls over here. So this is getting a look at both of them. Anyway, I don't know what this is. It's an arch when you first get there. This statue is relatively new. It's a statue of Nikola Tesla, who apparently worked in this region at some point. And I believe that this was not here when I was there 20 years ago because I do not remember seeing this as a kid. I believe this is relatively new. Anyway, another picture. This is a tour you can go on, Cave of the Winds. I'll show what that is a little bit later on. I did not do this trip because I did it the last time I was here. And here's a happy little smiling bear for Cave of the Winds as well. You'll see that later on. Here's a picture of what it looks like. These are the American Falls here. There's some closer up views. That's I guess it's just out of the river that runs between them. This is Made of the Mist, the boat tour that they do. I did that when I was here with my family, but did not on this trip because I didn't have as much time. Anyway, American Falls, you can see the sign, what it looks like up at the lip of the falls, a bridge to get over to this little island. And here's the view looking down, right next to the American Falls. All the people down there in the yellow jackets, that is the Cave of the Winds, little thing that you can go pay to see. Anyway, there's the water, what it looks like up close. Yeah, so you can pay and you go down there and you can walk on this little walkway and it's right down at the base of the fall. They give you the little yellow rain slicker because you would get soaked otherwise. There's a lot of spray and water that gets kicked up, as you might expect. And here's people looking down at the falls. Pretty decent picture here, I think. I do not have a great camera. The camera I use is a point and shoot camera. It is on the high end of that, but it is not a camera with like a lens that you can trade out. It's not that fancy. Anyways, these are just more pictures of the falls. You can see there's the Top of the Falls restaurant. I did not eat here. It was overpriced. This is, what is this, Terrapin Point, Horseshoe Falls. This is the Canadian Falls. Now, you didn't get great pictures of this fall because it kicks up so much spray. It actually makes it hard to get a good picture, at least on the American side. There's better pictures on the Canadian side, on the other side of the river. But yeah, that picture didn't come out. Yeah, some of these pictures didn't come out great. These ones are a bit blurry, but you get the idea right here on the edge. Over there on the other side is the Canadian side. There's actually much more on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls than on the American side. And there's one of the Made of the Mist boat tours. They've been running the Made of the Mist boat tours apparently since the 1850s. Not with that boat, but with a boat of some kind for a very long time. Anyway, there you see, again, a lot of mist gets kicked up by the falls. And that's just another view of the river. There is something on the Canadian side called Journey Behind the Falls. You can't, that's what that sign says. It says Journey Behind the Falls, where you like go behind the waterfall in a cave or something. I would have liked to have done that if I'd had more time, but it was in the afternoon by the time I actually drove up here, so I didn't have a chance to do too much except walk around and take some pictures up here at Niagara. Here's another little thing still on the American side, Three Sisters Island. These three little islands that are just above the falls. This is what they look like here. So I'll just show these pictures. These are probably not as interesting, but it's quite pretty here. A little waterfall here. An old stone bridge. I don't know how old this is. It looks like it could date back to the 19th century, though, because it does look pretty old. And the little rapids. This is up above the falls. All the there's all these birds congregate there. They tell you there's actually all these fences. So you can't see that in the picture, but there's all these fences. They do not want you to walk out or go on the rocks or something because if you go out in the water, it's a very strong current, and apparently it can sweep you right over, down and over the falls. See, there's the actual falls right down there. So they're like, do not step over the walls. Do not cross the bridge. You could get swept over the falls, and that would be bad. So. Granted, it would be your own fault, but yeah, see how there's a fence everywhere? It's all fenced off. They want you to be very careful about not getting in the water. Apparently, some people have been stupid and gotten swept over the falls, but yeah, you can see that it's pretty choppy, and the falls are quite close. Anyway, so yeah, more of the river. This is on the other side of American Falls. I was over here before, and then I walked over to the other side, so just a few more pictures of what that looks like. That one's a little bit blurry. It's the Maid of the Mist docking terminal on the Canadian side. This is an observation tower you can go up and see. You have to pay to go up here. I don't know why people would, because it's basically the same view that you get without paying. I guess it's slightly better, but yeah, I didn't quite get that. The Made in America store, which had all kinds of international food, as the sign said. One thing that was interesting about Niagara Falls, and something that had changed from when I was there before, is there were a lot of South Asian families there. People from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, people who are clearly South Asian. And I don't know why there were so many of them there. Perhaps it's just a vacation destination for people in the area, but that was surprising. And indeed, the International Food Court had Indian food. You can tell by the little flag there. So that was something I was not expecting to see. Perhaps, I think that Toronto has a large South Asian community, and they maybe were just coming down from Toronto. Okay, anyway, this is crossing over into Canada. There were a lot of traffic. By the way, it's much easier to cross into Canada to go through border security than it is to cross into the US. The US has very tight border security. Canada, I wouldn't say is lax, but is not as demanding. There's a whole bunch of cheap crap over on the Canadian side. All the touristy stuff, like the Ripley's Believe It or Not, and mini golf, and all that, touristy, kitschy stuff. And this is showing that haunted house. I mean, it's good fun for the kids, but it's cheap touristy stuff basically, laser tag. So that's what some of these pictures are from. The big Ferris wheel, bowling alley, etc., etc. Makes for decent pictures, but it is the cheap touristy stuff. Niagara's 200-foot drop, MGM Studios, etc. This is all the touristy stuff. Anyway, the rest of these are from the park on the Canadian side, which is, I don't know what the name of this park is. Clifton Hill, I suppose. That's what it says here. But so anyway, these are pictures when the Canadian side, looking back at the American Falls here. The American Falls, even though the American Falls are lower than the Canadian ones, you have a much better chance of surviving if you go over the Canadian ones because it's all rocks on the American Falls. It's all rocks. You would not want to go over that. And there's a picture of the Canadian Falls. You get much better views of the Canadian Falls when you're on this side. That is the bridge where you cross between the two countries. And what is this? This is like a cafe or restaurant of some kind. It's quite nice. There you go. That's a pretty good view of the Canadian Falls. Horseshoe Falls, because they're in the shape of a horseshoe. You can't get a good picture of this on the American side. And here's some dude chilling and looking out at the falls. This is the Welcome Center on Canada's side, right by their falls. This is a closer up view, but there's so much spray you can't see anything. Another close-up view. You also get really wet standing here taking this picture. There's so much spray kicked up that you get soaked. Anyway, so that was the best picture I could get of that. That's, I don't know, little funicular vehicle thing. I don't know why you'd take that. You could just walk up the hill. Now, something else that's interesting is I was here on July 1st, and as all Canadians know, July 1st is Canada Day. It's the day that they celebrate Canadian independence. So the horse-drawn carriages had their Canadian flags out, and lots of people were dressed up with Canadian flags or shirts and all that kind of jazz. So this family here has their maple leaf hats on, so it was quite nice. And there was actually a fireworks show, but that was later at night, and it's kind of hard to get good pictures of fireworks, so I was not able to get anything particularly good. This weird, sort of nondescript looking building is where I stayed. This is a hostel in Niagara. Very cheap to stay here, only $30 a night. I stayed in hostels a lot if it's the cheapest way to travel, if you don't mind staying with other people. The only things that I'm really looking for are sort of three things. Number one, a bed to sleep in. Number two, a shower so that I can clean myself up after traveling. And number three, a wireless connection so I can use the internet. And the hostels have all of them. So again, as long as you don't mind sharing a room with other people, you're pretty good. And that's what this was. Now, this hostel was kind of interesting because they did not accept credit. They only accepted cash, which is kind of bizarre, but they only accepted cash, no credit. One of the few places I've been that showed that. So anyway, that's what I saw in Niagara. And if you're curious what this looks like, Niagara Falls, if you want to see what it looks like on Google Maps, one reason why Google Maps is fun. Here is Goat Island on the American side. These are the American Falls are right here, Bridal Veil Falls, and the Canadian Falls, the Horseshoe Falls, are right here, if you're curious. So that's where that's located. And that's the bridge that cross over. And this is where I was walking around here on the Canadian side. So anyway, always nice to see things on Google Maps. Okay, anyway, the next day, got up in the morning and drove over to Toronto. So that's where these next pictures are going to be from. Toronto's pretty close. It's only about an hour and a half drive. Depending on traffic, traffic can be really bad. But roughly a 90-minute drive. So the rest of these pictures are from Toronto. And here's the downtown. This is the area I was walking around in, all through this area. So let's open that up and take a look, shall we? Look at Toronto. And go ahead and cue up the photos here again on the slideshow. All right, this is where I stayed. Canadian Backpackers Inn, another hostel. This one was quite nice, by the way. Quite big too. Huge, huge hostel. They had they had over 100 people staying here. Very, very big. Much bigger than the other place that I stayed. And they did have parking, but very limited parking. They had a parking lot that could handle 5 cars, but fortunately, most people who stay in hostels don't have cars, and I was able to park my car here. What is kind of hard to see is there's a wall right here, and there's another wall right here. You had to drive through this really narrow alley. You had to drive through an alley and then make a left to get in here, and it was actually too small to back up and turn around, so I actually had to put the car in reverse and drive around the corner and then up an alley to get out of here the next day, which is not the easiest driving I've ever done, but whatever, was able to do so, got out okay. So the rest of these are going to be pictures from Toronto. Here's a view of the CN Tower in the distance. We'll see that a lot. This is a memorial of some kind. I'm afraid I don't know who this is to. I believe the name says Adam Beck in the background. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. Not an expert on Canadian history. This is the Canadian Opera Company. This is Toronto's Opera House. I did not go in here, but it was an interesting looking building. This is I believe this is a war memorial of some kind, I think. There's other ones in Toronto, but I think this is a war memorial of some kind, and they were doing construction, so didn't look all that pretty. A historic house I just saw while walking along. I'd take pictures of anything that looks remotely interesting. That seemed like a nice enough house. This is a Great War Memorial, 1914 to 1918, World War I. So that's one of many memorials to people who served in World War I. Here's a picture of Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister. This is right outside the Ontario Parliament. See, Legislative Assembly of Ontario. That's where this is taken. So here's a picture of the building. And then I do have some pictures from inside, what it looks like up close. By the way, tight security, very tight security. There are these two guys here, and they didn't ask me anything or say anything. I just walked right in. So very, very tight security at the Ontario Parliament. A little bit tighter security if you go into some of the American legislative bodies, but very relaxed. Canadians are not as uptight about that stuff. But anyway, some pictures of the inside, just on the inside. I walked right in. There was nobody there. This nice woman, I asked her, I was like, well, when's the next tour? And they're like, well, nobody's here, so I'll just give you a tour. I was like, okay, that's nice enough. This was in the morning. This is the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Very nice chamber. And so a couple pictures of that for the curious. I've been to quite a few of these legislative chambers in Canada. Quite a few, actually. I was in the Victoria one in British Columbia last year. But anyway, very nice looking, very modern, while also preserving the traditional look and feel. A painting of Canadian Confederation, for those who are curious, and other paintings of other people who had served as Canadian Prime Minister or the head of the Ontario Parliament. This is a graphic on the ceiling, for some reason, stained glass, what more of the building inside looks like, a lot of marble. Apparently this part of the building was redone after the original part burned down sometime in the 19th century, and they rebuilt it using marble instead of wood. This is interesting. This is the first mace that was used in Ontario. I don't know if you can read the text here, it's kind of small. This was first used in Niagara and Toronto. Apparently this was actually captured by the US in the War of 1812 and brought back to the United States, then given back to Canada by FDR in 1934. Kind of funny that this was apparently held in the US for over 100 years. Kind of amusing to me. And this is the current mace that they use in Ontario. For those who don't know, the mace is used to open and close the legislative session in Canada. It's a British tradition that we do not use in the US. Here's a cannon that was given to Toronto. It was apparently captured in the Crimean War. It was captured at the siege of Sevastopol, for those who know where that is in Russia, down by the Crimean. And it was given to Canada, and it's outside the Ontario Legislative Building. Curiosity fountain. These next couple pictures are from the University of Toronto, which is right next to the Parliament building. So just some pictures from there. Granted, some of the buildings are just nondescript dorms, but there were some very pretty buildings like this too. I believe this is the administrative building. I am not 100% sure, but I think that's what this was. Anyway, very pretty. I thought so in any case. One of the courtyards inside. It reminded me a little bit of some of the buildings at Oxford and Cambridge. I've been to both, and it looked a little bit like that. Obviously not as old, but similar in terms of the stonework. There's the CN Tower in the distance. I've walked a ways from earlier this morning, and there was like a youth soccer team out there practicing on the field at the University of Toronto. Now this is a memorial to the students at University of Toronto who died in World War I in the Great War. See how it says 1914 to 1918. So here's a zoomed in shot of the start of the memorial. And this is the full memorial, to give you an idea. Yeah, a lot of students fought in the Great War and died in the Great War. Just to give you an idea of the people who, because people who are university age were the kind of people who would have been on the battlefield anyway. But just to give you a sort of a sense that this is just the University of Toronto. And yeah, a lot of people, a lot of Canadians fought in World War I. Okay, this is a picture from another one of the historic looking buildings. This one is a small chapel, Trinity College Chapel. It's an Anglican chapel. Very pretty inside. Small, but very pretty. I thought that this was quite attractive. And here's a shot of the altar. Very nice. I was there in, I don't know, I guess it was like 10 a.m. when this picture was taken, and the sun was coming in. Very light. Very nice. Some more stuff from the college. This is another courtyard. I don't know what the deal is with this courtyard, but I thought it was very pretty with the designs that they had staked out on the ground, the way the grass was grown. Just very nice. Would be a nice place to relax in one of the doors. All right, from there it was on to the Royal Ontario Museum. You can see the sign. And this building has really crazy architecture. This is quite a museum. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who goes to Toronto. Not the cheapest museum I've ever been in, but all sorts of things. Natural history, all different cultural things from different parts of the world, all different great stuff. This is right in the sort of entryway. There's this, well, this is the original building, I think, the brickwork, and then they expanded on it to the current entrance. There is a huge dinosaur skeleton in front. I had to take this picture about 4 times to get the lighting correct, but this one did come out quite nice. And that's the view looking up underneath. Pretty good. The Stair of Wonders. This deserved a picture. The Stair of Wonders. I saw this and I was like, wow, there must be something interesting about this staircase. No, it's an ordinary staircase. There was nothing inside. It's just a staircase. Stair of Wonders, you disappoint. You disappointed me, Stair of Wonders. In French, the Escalier des Merveilles wasn't particularly marvelous either. No marvels or wonders. So I was very disappointed by the Stair of Wonders. Very disappointed. This is more of the interior. This is the old part of the museum, what it looked like. There's some older looking paintings on the walls. Nice looking though. And then all sorts of random things from different parts of the world, cultural artifacts. This is from somewhere in East Asia. I'm not sure if this is from, I think it's Chinese, but I'm not entirely certain. It could be from Korea or Japan. It's from somewhere in East Asia. Similar, this idea as well. This, it looks like a rickshaw cart, but I'm not certain on that. and then this, what looks to be a pagoda that's very heavily detailed. I don't know what it's doing in the museum, but it's worth looking. It's worth looking at. Now this, a few words about this. This is a copy of the painting The Death of General Wolfe. It is a very famous British painting by Benjamin West. Here's the caption. I'll put it up here if you want to look at it. A famous painting by Benjamin West. Apparently he did 5 copies of this. This is one of the 5 that he did. This one's the last. Yes, he did the same painting 5 times. And this is the copy that the Royal Ontario Museum has. This is a very famous painting. I have used this in my teaching when I'm talking about the 7 Years' War. That's the French and Indian War. You might have heard, be more familiar with that name. Very, very famous painting. It inspired a lot of copycat paintings that I've worked with in my own research, paintings in the late 18th century that were done in a similar style. And it's a very much sort of a pro-British imperialism painting of Wolfe dying on the Plains of Abraham at the Battle of Quebec. We will see more of the Battle of Quebec later on as I go through these pictures, because that is, there's a lot of focus on that in Quebec City, which is another place I went to. These are Canadian propaganda stuff. I think that this is, I don't know if this is from World War I or World War II, but these are Canadian propaganda stuff. More random odd things. These are Inuit garb from far up in the northern part of Canada. Very, very warm. First Peoples of Canada. For again, for those who don't know, in Canada, the original inhabitants are not called Native Americans, or I guess it would be Native Canadians. It usually used the term First Peoples, which I think is appropriate. But that's what this is a look at here. And another example of the similar thing, these staircases. Not the Stair of Wonders, by the way. Not the Stair of Wonders. But the other nondescript staircases had this totem pole carving, which was pretty nice. So this nondescript staircase was much more interesting than the Staircase of Wonder. This part of the museum had this really elaborate mosaic on the ceiling with, what is this stuff here? I believe this is a Christian inscription here of some kind, but this really elaborate mosaic. I don't know why you'd go to all the trouble to put a mosaic on the ceiling, but it was very pretty. It looked like somebody put in a lot of time and effort to put this together originally, and it was just in this nondescript part of the museum. Of course, the museum also has lots of dinosaur stuff. I always did like dinosaurs as a child. It's been many years since then, but I did enjoy taking some pictures. Lots of kids in this part of the museum. Kids always love dinosaurs, so some different skeletons here that just stood out. Just a few pictures of that. I like the angle of this one. I was able to get a nice view of this particular one of the, I don't know which dinosaur this is, but some kind of meat-eating one, right in front of the camera there. And the ceratopsid here of some kind. It's not a triceratops, but something similar. There also were a lot of animal models as well in the museum. This is moose and wolf. In here there are lots of other animals. I just took this because these are Canadian animals. They had all sorts of other ones as well. Arms and armor exhibit. It was not bad. I have seen better arms and armor exhibits though in Europe. I've seen much better ones in Britain and France than this particular one, which is, you know, no shame. But what they had was okay, but I've seen better. This was quintessentially Canadian. They also had hockey, 2 hockey players. They had like the hockey suit, and they had this right next to the arms and armor exhibit, and the caption was "Modern Armor for Sport." So being Canada, it's not an American football uniform. It's of course hockey pads, of course, right? We'll see more of hockey stuff later on in these pictures. And more cultural artifacts from around the world. I don't know where this was from. It was just an interesting looking mask. I don't know where it was from, but it was pretty neat. This is kind of interesting. I like this picture. This is the arms and armament of a warrior of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire was a Indian empire that existed from the 16th century through really the beginning of the 19th century. Anyway, so this would be what a member of the Muslim warrior aristocracy would have been wearing. You have sort of this mesh armor in a way. Then there's the sword here, the shield, and of course you've got your musket as well. So this is what someone in the, I believe the 18th century would have been wearing if they were, like I said, a member of the Muslim warrior aristocracy in the Mughal Empire. Again, I've worked a lot with India. My research deals with South Asia, British colonial India, so this holds more meaning for me, which is why I have this picture in here. This is a group of arrows. If you've never seen someone using like a real bow and arrow before, if you've never seen that in person, which I have, you might think, well, an arrow, that wouldn't really hurt someone if you fired that. But, well, if you look at the arrows, you're like, wow, these arrows actually look really deadly. And I've seen someone fire it, an accomplished archer fire it pretty close up, and it's very easy to see how people could kill each other with bows and arrows. Yeah, these things are pretty nasty. So, wanted to go ahead and get a picture of that. Some other things that they had, again, this is all still things in the museum, and there are tons of things I didn't take a picture of. This is a copy of the Quran. It's from Egypt. I believe it was from the 15th century, if I remember the caption. That's the 1400s. Very pretty, all handwritten. A copy of some passage. I'm afraid I do not read Arabic, but I thought it was very pretty. A very large book, very large book, oversized. And there was a similar copy here of the Torah, all written in Hebrew. Similar idea. This is actually on a scroll, I guess. It's not in a bound book, but also similar idea right there. Very, very interesting. Also quite old. I think this is from the 15th or 16th centuries as well, so also quite nice. So anyway, all kinds of artifacts. This is the Egyptian wing of the Royal Ontario Museum, all Egyptian artifacts. The downside to this is if you've been to the British Museum in London, the collection is just much better. So I actually did not spend a lot of time here. I'm spoiled by having spent 4 months living in London and having been to the British Museum a bunch of times. So it's not a bad collection, but it is not what you'd see in London, unfortunately. This was something that I thought was pretty cool. They had all these coins. This was in their Roman section. These are all coins. They are tracing all the Roman emperors through a coin of each one, which for someone who enjoys Roman history like myself was pretty interesting. Although they only started with Augustus, which is fair, he was the first emperor, but nobody before that. So there's no coin of Julius Caesar, and there's no coin of Cornelius Sulla, which is disappointing because, well, would have been nice to see one of Sulla's coins, but whatever. And then finally, here's a picture of their artifacts from ancient Greece, which again were nice, but didn't compare to what's in the British Museum in London or what's in the Louvre in Paris. And I've spent a fair amount of time in both of them, so not bad, but obviously doesn't compare. Still, the Royal Ontario Museum gets a huge vote of recommendation from me. Definitely go see this if you are in Toronto and you're passing through. This is both another picture of the exterior of the building. You can really clearly see the original building here and then what they added onto it, the crazy pointy thing. Also, this guy here, there was this crazy guy on the street corner. This says, University of Toronto's soapbox for jihad hate, Israel our first defense against creeping jihad. It was some kind of anti-Muslim statement. I don't know, some kind of crazy protest. I think he was there must have been something at University of Toronto that was like a Muslim student union or something, and this guy's protesting it. Anyway, crazy guy on a street corner, whatever. Oh, all right, but moving on. So other parts of Toronto, I went down, let's see, what street is it here? Went down Yonge Street. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Yonge Street. And this is one of the squares, Dundas Square. Yonge Dundas Square, and it's just like a big open area, I suppose. So not too much more to see here. Other things I came across, this is a small church, the Church of the Holy Trinity. Not one of the more famous churches in Toronto, but just took a picture of the outside and the interior. Rather nice looking. This is one of the big public squares in Toronto. This is right next to the old City Hall, a big open area with fountains and the like. A nice place to get lunch. It looked like a lot of business people were getting lunch here from like these big high rises. That is a picture of the old City Hall, that building in the background, and those are Toronto flags in front of it. This is the Toronto City flag for the curious. The stylized T is pretty interesting because I noticed right away that the Toronto Blue Jays use this font on their jerseys. They obviously got this kind of interesting font from the Toronto City flag, so that was news to me. And anyway, this is a picture of the old City Hall. See? Old City Hall down there. Very interesting building. You can see it was done in an old-fashioned kind of style. And here's another war memorial. It was originally clearly a Great War Memorial, and then they stuck on World War II and Korea on the sides. That's very common, that a lot of the war memorials were to World War I, and then they added on afterwards. So there you go, another shot of this building. Historic building. I did not go inside this, so I don't know what it looks like on the inside, but another historic building in the middle of the downtown. This is, I believe, the largest and probably the most famous church in Toronto, the Cathedral of St. James. This is an Episcopal church or Anglican church, and there's another view of the outside. It's quite big, much bigger than the other chapels you saw earlier. Here you go, St. James Cathedral. First started in the early 19th century. It burned down a couple times. Looks like it was burnt down. Let's see, the second church was burnt in 1839. Was then another cathedral was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1849. This cathedral was started in 1850 and finished in 1874. So anyway, here's the interior. Similar to a lot of other Anglican churches I've been in terms of the design, a lot of elements I've seen in a lot of churches in Britain. Similar idea here in terms of how it's done. Very nice though. Speaker's pulpit on the left or just to the right of the altar. And the view looking back. I also noticed there are a lot of regimental flags here. I might notice this on the sides. Again, this is very typical for churches in Britain. They have regimental flags on the interior. And I was wondering about that. I was like, I wonder what military regiments are associated with this. And then this stained glass here explained what local military groups were associated with. And it's been a whole bunch of different groups over the past 200 years. So, excuse me, that whole slide, that explained that. And if you're curious, you can pause it and read if you're really curious. I'm not going to read all that. Anyway, from there it was on to Toronto's market, the St. Lawrence Market. I've been to quite a few markets. This was very similar to some of the markets on the West Coast. In Seattle, Pike Place Market, and in Vancouver, Granville Island Market was similar to them. Oh, the modesty of St. Lawrence Market, #1 food market in the world. Well, I don't know about that. It was a nice market. I don't know about this though. But hey, they're putting a big banner out saying they're #1. Anyway, they obviously think that this is a pretty impressive place. So it's a market, you can get all kinds of fresh food, produce, get all kinds of meat from the Sausage King if that's what you're looking for, all kinds of cheese. This Alex Farms cheese. This, I don't know if you can see this, but it says an adventure in cheese. An adventure in cheese. And this guy back here looks like the kind of person who'd be working in a cheese shop. But they had a lot of different kinds of cheese. And this is a place that was selling more in the way of meat. Lots and lots of different kinds of meat, if that's what you wanted. This place is selling flowers. Lots and lots of fresh flowers. Anyway, so St. Lawrence Market, lots of all kinds of well, it's a market, but lots and lots of different vendors. Big place. Would be a nice place if you were looking to get some fresh food. Now from there, again, remember, this is all one day, by the way. This is all still on the same day. And after driving from Niagara in the morning, from there was on to this location. This is an indoor mall. And one of the more unusual things is it's sort of like a normal mall in the center of the town. And then you go down to the basement floor. And what's down in the basement? Well, the Hockey Hall of Fame, located down in the basement. Yes, in a mall, not in its own separate building, down in the basement of a mall. Which I was not expecting that. Pretty surprising. But this is the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is totally worth checking out if you enjoy sports. Now, I am not a huge hockey fan. I'm from the Mid-Atlantic. Hockey is not big in this area. But I did think that this was pretty interesting to go see. Here's a whole bunch of different goalie masks all set up there together. NHL zone, obviously there's all kinds of NHL stuff, although there's more than just NHL, lots of other hockey stuff as well. Canadians, of course, live and die by hockey. Absolutely love hockey. This is a copy of a captain's jersey from every team in the NHL. Every captain provided a jersey, a game-worn jersey from the 2013 season, so lots and lots of them. The local team where I am is the Washington Capitals, so this is an Ovechkin jersey that was contributed. That's why I took a picture of this one here. Memorabilia from different NHL teams. Cards over here, pennants in the background, all kinds of collector's items. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but these guys seem to think this is pretty interesting. And all kinds of stuff for families and kids. This is stuff for the kids where it's like these games where somebody shoots a puck at them and they have to be the goalie and stop the puck. And it's like a video screen that shoots at them. This is what it looks like on the other side. This is where you try to shoot a puck and get it past the video goalie is the idea here. So stuff for the kids to do. When I was like 10 years old, I would have enjoyed this a lot. Now, here's another picture. I believe that this may be the most Canadian poster that has ever been created in the history of Canada. So let's just look at what's going on here, first of all. Number one, it's for hockey. So, first and foremost, it's for hockey. Number two, it's for Team Canada hockey with the maple leaf and the insignia for Team Canada. Number three, it has O Canada on it. O Canada in the banner for this particular poster. And then number four, it even has A on the poster. Like, they even wrote out the A. And by the way, Canadians do say that, although not as much as the stereotype goes. They definitely do mention that. So all of these things combine to make this, as I said, one of the probably just about the most Canadian poster you will ever see in your entire life. Show your support for Team Canada hockey and cheer on the nation. Well, I'm sure everyone will be doing that next year at the Winter Olympics. There were also little booths for each NHL team. This is the one, I took one for the Capitals. They were sharing a spot with the Winnipeg Jets. Just a picture of what their jersey, their feeder team, their minor league hockey team, which is the Hershey Bears for the Capitals. I have seen the Hershey Bears play. They're not, Hershey, Pennsylvania is not too far from where I live. And over here, the Winnipeg Jets. I'm glad that Winnipeg has a team back again. They deserve a hockey team way more than Atlanta does. Note that the minor league team for Winnipeg is the St. John's Ice Caps. We'll come back to the St. John's Ice Caps. Probably not in this video, but later on. But just keep them in mind because I will be in St. John's later on in some of these pictures. Other stuff in the Hall of Fame, these are all trophies. Other trophies, like different cups that people have gotten for hockey. I don't know what all these trophies are for, but these are different ones that have been awarded in the past for hockey teams. This one here is the University Cup, which is given to the Canadian college champion every year, or at least it used to be. I don't know if it still is. Okay, this is the original one. There's a newer one they give out now. So all the whatever Canadian college or university wins the hockey tournament, whatever they have each year, they get this cup. And actually, University of Toronto had apparently won it quite a few times. I saw when I was looking at it, and other ones have won, of course, as well. Now there was a huge exhibit on something called the Summit Series, which I had never heard of before, but apparently all Canadian sports fans are well familiar with this. Apparently, there was a huge series played between Canada and the Soviet Union in 1972, and it was 40 years since the Summit Series. Well, last year anyway. 40 years since the Summit Series, but apparently this humongous hockey series in 1972 where they played 8 games between Canada and the Soviet Union, 4 games in each country, and it was tied 3-3-1 going into the 8th game. 3 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie. So it was tied going into the 8th game, which was played in Moscow. And apparently Canada was behind and they scored and it was tied like 5-5 or something. And Canada scored a goal with 30 seconds left to win 6-5 in the 8th game and win the Summit Series. So there was this huge exhibit on this. I had never heard of this before, but apparently it's a very famous event in Canadian sporting history. So you know what? You go to these places and you learn things you'd never heard of before. I know a lot about, know quite a bit about sports, but I had never heard of this before. So, yeah, apparently it was a big deal in Canada, and there was a big exhibit on that in the Hockey Hall of Fame. This was a huge like stuffed hockey mask. I don't know why it was there. This stuff from the Golden Goal from the 2010 Winter Olympic Games, the gold medal game played between Canada and the U.S. If you remember this game, this was a game that was tied. It went into overtime. Actually, the U.S. scored to tie it up right before overtime. And then they went into overtime. And in overtime, Sidney Crosby scored and won the gold medal for Canada at the Olympics, at the Vancouver Olympics. And this is the puck, these are the gloves, and this is the stick that were used to score that. I actually do remember, I was watching this game when it happened. I remember being disappointed that the U.S. had lost, but that said, this game meant about 10,000 times more to Canada than it did to the U.S., so can't be too upset about that. If the U.S. had won, every American would have been like, nah, so what? We won another gold medal. Whereas for Canada, this was pretty much life or death, winning the gold medal in hockey at the Vancouver Olympics. So it meant a lot more to Canada. This is a jersey from the Miracle on Ice, USA, which is what Americans are much more familiar with, the 1980 Olympics. And then these are all jerseys from different hockey teams around the world, like different Olympic hockey teams. So you've got Spain, Italy, Romania, Poland, Finland, Japan, and so on. Some different colorful ones, and here's just some more of them. This is the Swedish team, by the way. Very sweet looking jersey. Very nice. Now, the highlight of the museum, I've saved this place for last, is so I mentioned most of the museum's down in the basement. Well, you go up this staircase and you're up at street level. You can see the light coming in through the stained glass here. And so all of the most prestigious stuff is up in this room on street level. Here's the Prince of Wales trophy. This is given to the winner of the Eastern Conference every year. So this year that went to what? The Boston Bruins, I think. Yeah, Bruins were in the finals this year. So the winner gets this trophy, the Prince of Wales trophy. Similar idea. The Campbell Bowl goes to the winner of the Western Conference. That was the Chicago Blackhawks, who won the Stanley Cup this year. So they get this trophy. Very nice looking trophy. And then this is the Conn Smythe, which goes to the playoff MVP every year. So all this is behind glass. And then you might notice in the background, well, here's the Stanley Cup itself, which is surprisingly not behind glass or not in protective custody or anything. It's just sitting there on a pedestal, and you can go right up and take a look and see the Stanley Cup, which is really really neat. You'd think they'd have more security. There was a woman standing there, but they're very friendly. They're like, you know what? You want to take a picture of the cup? That's fine. Go right ahead. Oh, you want to go up and get your picture taken with the cup? Yeah, that's fine. So here I am with the Stanley Cup. Let you go right up, take your picture. You don't have to pay or stand in line or anything. You just walk right up, get your picture with the cup. It was not as big in person. I thought it looked bigger on TV than in actual person. I thought it was a little bit smaller in person. But yeah, let you go right up and get your picture taken with it. A couple people were kissing the cup and getting their picture taken kissing the cup, which was kind of funny. I'm not enough of a hockey fan to do that, but I did enjoy getting this picture and having this. So yeah, this was pretty neat. This was one of the highlights of the trip. I'm not, as I said, I'm not a hockey fan, but getting to see the cup and get a picture taken with it, a highlight of the trip to be sure. Okay, other stuff. Right next to that is the Air Canada Centre, which is where the Maple Leafs and the Raptors play. This is where the sports teams have their headquarters. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, so Toronto FC and whatever the Marlies are. I think they're a minor league hockey team. Anyway, they all have their administration in this building. So here's the Air Canada Centre. Might have noticed by all the Canadian flags and the Maple Leaf stuff. So again, Air Canada Centre, the Maple Leafs and the Raptors play here. Now, that's nothing against the Raptors. Canadians do like basketball, or people in Toronto do support the Raptors, but the Maple Leafs have 100 times the following the Raptors ever have or ever will. The Maple Leafs did make the playoffs this year, though. They did make the playoffs for the first time in a while, so maybe they're finally not sucking. Maybe they're finally going to improve. More hockey fans could tell you more than I could about that, though. Anyway, it's the summer, so obviously the Leafs are not playing in July. It's July 2nd when I was here, so obviously they're not playing. This is on the waterfront, Harbor Square, so this is just a few pictures from the Toronto waterfront. A nice little park if you want to go outside, and a lot of people were walking their dogs here. There's a boardwalk. Here's the lake. It is not bad in the summer. I'm not sure you would want to go swimming in the lake. Apparently, people who live in Toronto generally do not go swimming in Lake Ontario very often. There is something called the Toronto Island. You can catch a little ferry to go out here. I did not have time for that, but there is a beach out there on the island. These pictures are from the harbor front, which is like right here. So I was not out on the island, but that's what it looks like. And there are, of course, a lot of boats docked there. Now, last thing to do in Toronto. Yes, this is all still the same day. Busy days, as I said. The last thing to do was to go see the Blue Jays play because they were playing, and I specifically picked the dates for my trip so I could see the Blue Jays when they were in town. The Blue Jays play in Rogers Centre, which used to be known as Skydome. Now they, of course, is owned by a corporate entity. Now it's Rogers Centre, but it used to be known as Skydome. So, of course, I wanted to go and see the Blue Jays play. Anytime I'm in a city that has a Major League Baseball team, always want to try and see them. I've been to over half the stadiums in Major League Baseball. The stadium's right next to the CN Tower. You can go in there. Of course, there's all this construction being done. And the Blue Jays, the Blue Jays not having a good season. They were expected to be the front runner in the AL East this year. They're not doing that well, but they still have a lot of fan support. There were a lot of people at this game, and they had a pretty decent crowd. I'd say they had a good between 20 and 25,000 at this game, which is pretty good for a Tuesday in the middle of the week. And a lot of people there with their jerseys. There's the CN Tower. I did not go up the CN Tower. It's rather a bit expensive to do so. There is a hotel built into Rogers Centre, for those who don't know. When Skydome opened, and that was in sometime in the 1980s that has a hotel built into it. You can actually get a hotel room that looks out into the playing field, which is really unique. I don't think there are any other stadiums that have this in Major League Baseball. I could be wrong, but I think it's the only one that has a hotel built into the stadium. Anyway, so here's another entrance going into the stadium. Merchandising on display here. You can buy your Blue Jays foam finger if you want. And all the players back there, they were. It looked like the most common jersey I saw was for Jose Bautista. He had the most common jersey, which makes sense because he's been on the team for a while and has been their big star. Anyway, here's a picture on the sort of when you come into the stadium down in the bowl. Okay, so the Sky Dome can be opened or closed. On a nice day, it's open. It can be closed for bad weather or if it gets too cold. With the dome open, this is a very pretty stadium. With the dome closed, it's not a very attractive stadium. It's actually kind of ugly. I've been in it when the dome was closed. When I was here in 1993, when the Blue Jays were defending World Series champs in 93, we were here and the dome was closed, and it was not a very attractive stadium. But with the dome open, it's quite pretty. So there it is. That's what the big dome looks like. It's sort of half. I guess it's like the back end. It never opens all the way. But there you go. And there's the hotel, by the way. The hotel room's right there with the corporate sponsors. This picture was blurry. It didn't come out, unfortunately. But there's the view from behind home plate. The Tigers were taking batting practice. The Blue Jays were playing the Tigers. And as is traditional, the visiting team takes batting practice second. So this is the Tigers taking BP. View of the concourse. Again, great sight lines. I think that they've redone this stadium because I'm pretty sure it didn't look like this originally. But they've done the thing that the Pittsburgh Pirates did originally where all the vending stuff looks out. You can see the stadium. It's like open from the vending concourse out to the stadium. All the new stadiums have that now. And here's the view from center field looking back. It is a turf field. It's not natural grass. It's all turf, as you'd expect. But the view looking out from center field. While I was, because I was there early, I saw all the Tigers take BP. And Prince Fielder was just mashing the ball out to right field. Prince actually hit a home run, and it went out to right field. And so a fan went out and, got the ball. And then like 3 pitches later, he hit a ball out to the exact same spot, and the same fan got another ball. The same fan got 2 balls. Now, granted, the stands were not full. There was empty out there in right field, but still, I thought that was pretty impressive. Same fan got 2 balls in batting practice because it was hit to like the exact same spot. But they were just crushing the ball in batting practice. And so here's just another view in center field, looking out, and another view in center field that's looking out to right field instead of to left. You can see how they moved the fences in from where they were originally. When this stadium was opened, they had the fences. Yeah, they've moved in the fences to make it easier to hit home runs, which a lot of teams have done. Here's Blue Jays Central, the pregame show. Now, I'm afraid I do not know who these personalities are. I'm sure these are some former players, but I'm afraid I do not know who they are. Blue Jays fans could probably tell me who these commentators are, but I don't know. Okay, so if you can't pay if you don't want to pay the premium to sit right behind in the nice seats, where is the best place to sit in a baseball stadium? The answer is right behind home plate in the upper deck. That is the place to sit. If you're ever curious, you want a great seat that's not expensive, ask for right behind home plate in the upper deck. You get great views. So I'm in the second row. There are these are the people in front of me in the second deck, second row, right behind home plate. Great views. You can see the entire field, and you can see the balls and strikes quite well too. Now, this game was actually a pretty interesting game. This was an absolute slugfest in this game. I took this picture to show. Doug Fister is the starter for the Detroit Tigers. He had pitched 2/3 of an inning. He had given up 4 runs, and he had thrown 37 pitches. 37 in 2/3 of an inning. Ooh. Blue Jays scored 4 runs in the first. I'll go ahead here and show the scoreboard. So Blue Jays scored 4 runs in the first. Detroit then scored 6 runs in the second inning. Chasing the Blue Jays starter, Chen-Ming Wong started the game. He made it 1 2/3 innings. He did not make it through the second inning. Gave up 6 runs in 1 2/3. Woo! Rough game. Then the Blue Jays scored 2 more runs in the bottom of the second. It was 6-6 after 2 innings. After that, nobody scored again until the 8th, and the Tigers won 7-6. They scored a run in the 8th. But wow, 12 total runs in the first 2 innings. It was brutal for the pitchers out there. Absolutely brutal. And Miguel Cabrera hit a monster home run to straightaway center in the second inning. It was probably 420, 430 feet. Absolutely crushed. But anyway, that was the last picture I took from the Blue Jays, and then it was back to the hostel, and that was the day in Toronto. So busy day, as you might imagine, since it took me over a half hour just to explain everything that happened. So yeah, that's where I went, and that was all in one day. And then the next day, it's time to get up and do it again. So let's look at Ottawa, and that'll probably be enough for this video, because that'll probably run up to an hour or so length. Now, keep in mind, again, you got to drive from place to place, and it is not a short drive from Toronto to Ottawa. In fact, from Toronto to Ottawa is about a 4 to 4.5 hour drive. So the next morning, got up at 6, got in the car, checked out of the hostel in Toronto, and drove to Ottawa. And I got to Ottawa, I guess, around 11, a little before 11. So that's not a short drive, but, you know, you don't have a lot of time to see what you want to see. So, you know, well, you got to get in as much as you can in the time you have available. So 4.5 to 5 hour drive, and then over to Ottawa. All the stuff that I saw in Ottawa was in the downtown, this area right here. So let's go back and take a quick look at that, shall we? So I'll just run through some of the sites. The first place I went to was right where I was staying, right where I had the car parked, was here, Byward Market in Ottawa. This was a much smaller market. It was not as impressive as the one in Toronto. Much smaller, but still a lot of shops. I don't have a ton of pictures here. A lot of flowers. If you were gardening, I guess you might like that. But yeah, not too terribly impressive compared to the St. Lawrence Market the day before. This was the Ottawa School of Art. I took this picture because there was another one of these Native American or First Nations totem pole out in front, right next to the parking garage. Anyway, and this is, you know, this looks like a historic building, and maybe it is, but apparently it's just some random ministry in the Canadian government. It's just some random building. It's nothing special. I think it was like the Bureau of Immigration or something like that. So it looks like a great, you know, it looks like it's this awesome building, but it's just some bureaucratic place. There were a lot of sign markers up on the street poles for the War of 1812, which is kind of funny because the War of 1812, all the stuff in Canada talks about how the Canadians like heroically beat off and stopped an attack by the United States, which is kind of amusing, being an American and seeing all this. So like Laura Secord is here on the left side, and most Americans have no idea who Laura Secord was, but she's of course a great Canadian hero who was in the War of 1812. And of course, was the 200th anniversary was real recent. I'm afraid I don't know who Charles de Salaberry was. I don't know who he was, but there's a whole bunch of stuff on that. A whole bunch of War of 1812 stuff up here. Here's the Fairmont Chateau Laurier. This is the fanciest hotel in Ottawa. It's very close to the Parliament building, so this is what the exterior looks like. Again, a lot of stuff is still decorated for Canada Day because it was just a couple days before that. Here's the interior. Very nice. Would be a nice place to stay. I did not stay at the Fairmont, as you might imagine. Just give you an idea of what the interior looks like. But they let you walk in, and the hoi polloi masses are allowed to walk in and take some pictures, but you don't stay there. Not going to be able to stay there. Way out of my price range. Here's a couple pictures of the Rideau Canal. The Rideau Canal is interesting. The Rideau Canal was, its intended function is, of course, as a canal. It's a series of locks that connects Ottawa down to the Great Lakes. This picture's a little bit blurry, but this is a view of the system of locks where the water goes up and down for boats. You can see how in order to take boats up and down, they raise and lower the water in these locks. I'm not sure if people are familiar with how canals work, but that's kind of the idea of how you deal with elevation changes. Anyway, the Rideau Canal's biggest claim to fame, though, is in the winter, it freezes over, and Canadians love to skate on the Rideau Canal. It's like one of the biggest outdoor public skating rinks in the world. It's like, it goes for miles, or I should probably say kilometers, for quite some distance, and people skate on the canal. Of course, in the summer, it's not frozen over, and maybe not as pretty, but still not the worst place to see. Gives you an idea of what it looks like. Here's a cool little painting someone did on the staircase. It's painted on the side of each one of these steps, so it's like broken up as you get closer, but neat little design. Here's the official Canadian memorial to the people who died in World War I and World War II. So this is the war memorial here. Here's just a couple pictures showing that. Also, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which pretty much every country has one of these, guarded by soldiers, I'd assume. Very nice monument, very dignified. And of course, they tacked on World War II in Korea. which is, again, as I've mentioned, common. This was built for, of course, the Great War, World War I, and then added on. We will remember them. Approximately 1 in 10 Canadians responded to the call to serve our nation during the First and Second World War. Of the many Canadians who served, more than 116,000 did not return in those conflicts. Anyway, so this is coming up to Parliament Hill. If you want to see this is the big attraction in Ottawa. Ottawa, the Canadian capital. Parliament Hill is where the government buildings are located. This looks like it's some fancy building, and I suppose it is, but this is actually, again, a place where members of Parliament have their offices. It's like the equivalent of the House office building in Washington, D.C., which I'm more familiar with. Much fancier than the House and Senate office buildings in D.C., much prettier. You cannot go in this building, by the way. It's private. And here's the actual Parliament building. Of course, the Ottawa Parliament looks very much like the Westminster Parliament in London. It's designed to look like it. The location is probably better, though. As you'll see, it's up on a hill, and it's kind of set off apart from the rest of the city. Very, very nice building. Very pretty. And I would go in this later and take the tour. Another couple pictures of this. Definitely reminded me of Westminster. Another monument to John Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister. And here's a monument to Elizabeth II. I always think it's kind of weird when they do monuments to people who are still alive. Like, how would it feel to go and see a huge statue of yourself? It must be strange for the Queen when she goes to Ottawa and sees this. It has to be kind of a strange feeling. But they do have one for Elizabeth. And there's a view from the front. By the way, there's a huge stage set up. That was set up for Canada Day, and they were still dismantling it. So, unfortunately, it marred the sightlines a little bit that there's this huge stage set up. And this is an eternal flame. I'm not sure why it's not over by the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but an eternal flame. I have no idea what this was. There was some huge outdoor exercise thing. It was like a yoga type thing. And not surprisingly, nearly everyone doing the exercises were women. There's like a couple men, but it's almost entirely women. So all these people with like their exercise mats doing the stretches or something. I don't know what this was, but I came across it. Hey, it's worth a picture. This is another one of the administrative buildings that flanks the Parliament building. Yeah, Confederation building, as it says. Another place of like staff and members of Parliament have their offices. All right, as the sign says, this is the Supreme Court of Canada. A view of the exterior of the building. Took a picture of that. Here's the inside. Now, there is a guided tour of this building, but I was not there at the correct time, so I was not able to take the guided tour. I was just able to see the inside. And here's a picture of the Supreme Court of Canada, and apparently they dress in red as opposed to the black that the justices wear in the United States. So I guess that's a difference. Unfortunately, there's a terrible glare in this picture, and I could not get rid of it, unfortunately. So unfortunately, you can't see it all. This is a little relief model of what downtown Ottawa looks like. So here's the Parliament building. This is the Fairmont Hotel. Here's the Rideau Canal. Goes over like this. And the Supreme Court is this building here. And of course, there's the Ottawa River. And some of the museums are over here, which is where I'll be going in a little bit. Library and Archives of Canada. This is where I would work probably if I were doing my research in Ottawa. This is like the archives. I've spent quite a bit of time in the Library of Congress in Washington for my research, but this is where I'd be working if I were in Ottawa instead. I don't know what this was. This was some kind of outdoor festival that was still set up. I think this was another Canada Day thing that was still in the process of being taken down. Now this building that you see me coming up to, this is the Canadian War Museum. All war stuff, military stuff. Here it is, Canadian War Museum, Musée Canadien de la Guerre. And so I went and checked this out. So these next couple pictures are all from this. This is a little a ways from the downtown. It's still within walking distance, but it's a little bit of a walk. If you enjoy military history, then I would recommend definitely seeing this. They had a lot of interesting stuff in here. I definitely spent a good 2 hours in this museum. Obviously, I do history. I do a lot of military history. I have taught military history a number of times before, so this holds more interest for me. Here's a little thing they had a little replica battle of the Battle of Quebec in 1759, the 30 minutes that changed Canada. So it's a little model of the French and the British at the Battle of Quebec, and it's a pretty good replica of what it looked like. Now, I would go on to Quebec a couple days later and see this battlefield in person, but we'll get to that in another video. This is an example of one of the uniforms. Unfortunately, there's, again, a terrible glare, but this is a period uniform from that era. This, Again, as an American, I love anytime looking at a Canadian museum on the War of 1812. The War of 1812, Canada saved from the American invasion. Yes, for Americans who don't know, the U.S. did invade Canada in 1812, and that was one of the major motivations of the war. But at some of the battles, the Canadians stopped the American invasion. Not before the Americans burned down the city of Toronto, though, which was known as York at the time. When the British burned the city of Washington the next year, the British burned down Washington, D.C. in 1814. That was in reprisal for the Americans burning down Toronto in 1813. And then that led to the Battle of Baltimore, which is when they wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. Anyway, so that was some of the stuff from the earlier period. The rest of this is from World War I and World War II. Now, I took a number of pictures of some of these artillery pieces and machine guns because I plan to use them in my teaching. This is an example of an artillery piece, a very common one from World War I. A view of the business end of the gun. Oh, no, I took this picture to show what the shells looked like, how big the shells were. That was why I took this picture. 18-pounder. Estimated 100 million shells were fired during the war. Okay, so the shell was 18.5 pounds, and the range was 5.5 kilometers. That's a little over 3 miles, for the curious. This is a picture. I took this picture because this was an example of medals that one of the soldiers had won, and this here on the left is a Victoria Cross, which is the highest honor that can be awarded in the British military, and almost no one can win a Victoria Cross without dying in the process. They're almost never given to people who are still alive. They're almost always awarded posthumously, so that's why I took the picture, because that's just to show that that was a Victoria Cross, if you want to see it up in person. Here's a little model of what a trench system looked like from World War I, from the Great War, just an example of that. Interesting to see. Which weapon would you choose? I think the reason why I like this one is because it had the spiked club down here. Apparently, in close range combat, these clubs actually were pretty effective. So yeah, go figure, right? You wouldn't think that something that primitive would be used as late as the 1910s, but apparently they were effective. When you get up close, you just smash somebody over the head with it. Anyway, so that was kind of interesting. This is an example of a machine gun from the Great War. Again, I intend to use this in my teaching. That's why I have this picture, and this is just the details. This is a German machine gun, an MG-08, fired 450 rounds a minute at a range of up to 1.8 kilometers. So again, that's just over a mile. Machine guns were one of the big killers in World War I. It was machine guns and artillery were the two great killers. That's why I have these pictures. This was a huge artillery piece. I think this is a howitzer, if I remember. I kept this guy in the picture. Usually I try to crop people out of the pictures, but I kept this guy in to show just how enormous this artillery piece is. Yeah, it's an 8-inch howitzer. Can fire a 90-kilogram shell. That's about, it's roughly 200 pounds in the non-metric system, up to a range of 11 kilometers. That's about 7.5 miles. So yeah, you can fire an enormous shell very, very long distance. Very, very long distance. So again, this is why artillery was one of the great killers in World War I. And that's why I took this picture too. Again, I'm going to use this in my teaching. Artillery inflicted approximately 60% of all wounds during the First World War, which is something people don't think. Generally don't conceptualize artillery as being the great killer, but it was. At least in World War I. Now this, another oddity that they have, this is one of Hitler's cars. Yeah, one of Hitler's cars is in the War Museum in Ottawa. Apparently this was captured by a Canadian group of soldiers in World War II. So note that the windows are like all shot up. Yeah, so here it is. Hitler, this was one of Hitler's Mercedes-Benz limousines, which he used as a parade car. It was captured by American troops and then brought to Canada. So pretty incredible that they have Hitler's car in this particular museum. I thought this was pretty crazy. It's in good condition aside from the windows. They did not replace the windows, which had been shot up, but everything else has apparently been restored, and it's a nice limousine. It's a nice car, classic car there. But I just thought that was pretty crazy. Anyway, these are guns from World War II. These are handguns, handheld machine guns, and rifles from World War II. This is a World War II machine gun here. Note that it's a lot smaller than the one from World War I. And check out the rate of fire, 25 bullets per second. Holy crap, 25 bullets per second. That's pretty amazing that they can fire that fast. So anyway, again, I'm plan to use some of this when I go and teach this. And and this is an American tank from World War II. Is this a Sherman tank? Oh, I didn't take the picture of the caption for that one, so I don't know, unfortunately. Balance of power, these are stats from the Cold War. This is depicts the East-West military balance as it stood in approximately 1982. This was a little video game that people were playing. It was like Fight the Cold War. It was like Fight the Cold War. And most of the people that were playing were not doing very well because I saw that the casualties were in like the hundreds of thousands in this little simulation. I was like, oh, this is a little bit scary. What would have happened if the Cold War had turned into an actual war? But anyway, yeah, all kinds of interesting stuff here in the War Museum. So if you like military stuff, go check this out. Here's the model they used to build the Ottawa memorial to the war dead. This is the model they used for it. It's in the museum. So anyway, that was all in the War Museum. Very worth checking out if you enjoy that kind of thing. This is where you pick up tickets to go on the Parliament tour. It was actually across the street, so went and got the ticket. The tour was like 3 or 4 hours after I got the ticket, so that's why I went and saw this other stuff. And now we're coming back and going to check out the inside of the building on the tour. This is a statue of Queen Victoria, by the way, also outside the building. Okay, so going on the tour of the Parliament building. This is the tour group here. Welcome to Canada's Parliament. This stone was laid by Edward, Prince of Wales, in 1919. By the way, that's the Edward VIII who abdicated, is the one they're talking about there, who was only king for a couple months in the late 1930s. So stuff on the interior. Who is this memorial to? I'm afraid I don't know. It looks like a soldier. I'm afraid I don't know, but here's some of the interior. This is one of the entrances where people come in to the Parliament chambers. Here is the House of Commons, or I don't know if that's the proper term. I think it's known as the Commons in the Canadian Parliament, but this is the lower chamber, the one where most of the action takes place. The interior, what it looks like. Unfortunately, there's all these other people in the tour group are in the picture, but get some pretty good view. The stained glass was very pretty. I enjoyed seeing the stained glass in the chamber, and you get a pretty good, yeah, there's another view of one of the stained glass, and you get a view of just what the chamber looked like. And here it is without all the tourists like myself in the picture here, with just what it looks like in the chamber. So very nice. It's similar to the Ottawa Parliament, but excuse me, similar to the one in Toronto, the Ottawa Parliament, but obviously a much higher chamber since this is the actual Parliament of Canada and not just of the province. And that's zooming in on the chair. More of the interior of the building. Just looking at this pillar, and there actually were guards here. One of the, probably the most heavily, this building had the most security out of any place I went in Canada. You did have to go through a metal detector to go in here, and there were a lot of security guards. Just a shot of the interior, what it looks like. Again, the style is neo-Gothic. Looks like a Gothic cathedral with all the buttresses and such. And again, that's designed to mimic the Parliament in Westminster in London, which also is done in a neo-Gothic style. In this room in 1866-67, delegates worked out Confederation, framed the Act of Union, under which all British North America, except Newfoundland, which didn't join until the 1950s, was now united into the Dominion of Canada. And this is the old Canadian flag, by the way. Prior to the maple leaf, they used that flag. Another view of the interior, pictures of the royal family are on the walls here. This is the entrance to the Senate chamber in Canada. The Senate in Canada is much smaller than the Commons. I hope that that's the right term. Much smaller. It has these formal paintings on the wall. It's much more intimate. The seats in the back are for, let's see. Well, here's more of the seats on the sides. I think I have a zoomed in view of the seats in the background. Some of these frescoes on the wall. Very nice. There we go. Yes. So the seat is for the, for the Governor General of Canada, who is, it's like a symbolic post, but they officially have to give consent. And then the more formal thrones in the background are if the Queen or other members of the royal family come visit. Those seats are set aside for them. Canada, of course, still being part of the British Commonwealth. And royal family is on a lot of people's minds right now since they just had the royal baby, just as I record this. So that dates this video if you're watching it much, if you're watching this months or years later, it's just dated this video. This is up on the ceiling, lots of different symbols. Again, these are all various symbols associated generally with different parts of Britain. There's the fleur-de-lis. By the way, the British crown still claimed the French crown as late as the early 1800s. But this is for Quebec. They have the fleur de lis on there. Here are the three reclining lions. That's from the Plantagenet family, dating very far back to Norman the Conqueror. Very old symbol for England. The English soccer team puts this on their jerseys, the three lions. You hear them referred to as that. You might be more familiar with that. The Welsh dragon, it was the thistle leaf, that's for Scotland. So different parts of the British Isles. There's the harp for Ireland in the background, for Ire. The rearing lion for Scotland, another symbol. So all different symbols associated with the British Isles are up on the ceiling. Okay, that's all for the Canadian Parliament building. Other stuff in Ottawa, yes, there's still more to see. So this cathedral is in the background, and I took this picture coming up to it. Another view. This church was actually very pretty inside. This is a Catholic cathedral. As you'd expect, the French association here, Cathédrale Notre Dame. Note that it's in French first and foremost. The interior has the ceiling that's like painted with stars or something looking like stars. Again, note how the Catholic cathedral looks very different from an Anglican cathedral. It's much more ornamental. That's very typical of Catholic cathedrals. The rude way to put it would be to say gaudy. I don't know if you necessarily say that or not, but you could put it that way. More ornamental at the very least. We'll leave it that way. See, all of the saints, I believe these are saints around the altar. And it's very pretty, don't get me wrong, but it's, there's a lot of stuff there. It goes back to some of the early disputes between Catholics and Protestants back in the 16th century. But very pretty building. The ceiling in particular, I really like the design on the ceiling with the stars and the deep blue color. Very, very nice there. And just some of the other examples of stuff that's inside. This is looking back at the entryway. It's always tough to get the lighting correct when you're shooting indoor stuff. And I've gotten better at that, but I still don't think that this is quite right. I still don't quite like the way that the light is coming in here. It's got the images a little too washed out, but a lot better than I've done in the past, in any case. And I think that this is a view on the outside of the building. Yes. Anyway, passing by, here's the National Gallery. I did not go into the National Gallery. I did not have time to see everything in one day, but this is the exterior of the building. And there is this they had this weird thing on the exterior of the building. It's like designed to show a melting ice cap or something, because when you were walking near it, there was sound playing it sounded like melting water or running water. So I think they were making some kind of statement about melting ice caps or global warming or something, I think. But I don't really profess to know the full story about what was going on here. In any case, I had one more museum to see. This museum back here. I believe this was the Canadian Museum of Civilization. It's actually across the river, but I'll show that later. Yep, here we are, the Canadian Museum of Civilization. And this was similar to the Royal Ontario Museum. Lots, but not as much. Not much stuff here on natural history. This was all cultural history. It was all, stuff connected to Canada in some way. Canada's history as a country, basically. So all stuff connected with that. So down on the first floor, down on the basement, is all the stuff associated with First Peoples of Canada. A lot of different stuff from there. So this stuff is from like the Pacific Northwest. I saw a lot of this when I was in Vancouver and Victoria. Stuff similar to this. But just really interesting to see all these totem pole things and all the interesting stuff. I love this style of artwork. I think it's gorgeous. I did buy one of these design type things as a souvenir when I was in Vancouver. But I mean, this is gorgeous right here, the way that this looks like. It's such a unique style of art. You really don't see this pretty much. I really can't think of anywhere else in the world that is a style of art that looks like this. And so just some more examples of what that looks like. Here's I think this is like an open boat of some kind. Looks a little bit like a canoe, but maybe a little bit bigger than that. And again, all stuff on First Peoples, various different stuff. I mean, it goes on and on and on. There's all kinds of stuff about this. I took this picture because there was lacrosse, stuff like that. And I've known some friends who played lacrosse in the past. And here's another example of what that looks like. But of course, there's other stuff in the museum too. Other stuff on, colonial history and other stuff on Canada's history after independence. So that's what this is, Canada Hall, A Journey Through Time. By the way, why is French given prominence? Well, when you cross the river in Ottawa, you actually cross into Quebec. So we're actually in Quebec here, and that's why French gets prominence over English, because this museum is actually on the Quebec side of the river. So this is all things associated with early history in Canada. This is designed to replicate Louisbourg in the mid-18th century, mid-1700s. So, example of this. By the way, this is inside. It's like this big dome. They make it look like you're outside, but you are actually inside. A reconstruction of what some of these towns would have looked like in Canada. This is a reproduction of a Ukrainian church in Alberta from like the 1940s or 50s. That's just what it looks like inside. Pretty wild. They like completely did a complete reconstruction of what this Ukrainian church looked like, which I assume would be, did it say Catholic Church? Yeah, it said Catholic Church, but very, very unusual. Again, this is all inside, even though it looks like it's outside. This is a ceiling design. Crazy painting job on the ceiling. Really wild. And then this is some bust that was like painted to look all crazy as well. This was another exhibit, face-to-face personalities, tete-a-tete, all different Canadian personalities. There were many, many people they featured. I just took the picture of Wolfe and Montcalm on the Plains of Abraham, a little exhibit on them. So there was way more stuff in there. I just didn't want to take too many pictures. But anyway, so getting out of the museum, there's a Japanese rock garden outside. If you're into Zen Buddhism, then this would appeal to you, I suppose. I not have a huge interest in that, but I suppose it's very peaceful. Now is where you can start to get some really nice views of Parliament Hill. This is looking back at the Parliament building from the other side of the river, from the other side of the Ottawa River. Very, very pretty. Gorgeous views from the other side of the river. This is the bridge that crosses the river, and there's that weird ice cube thingy outside the National Gallery, but this picture's pretty good too. Over there is the Fairmont Chateau is over there in the background. So here's the bridge across. Apparently it's called the Alexandra Bridge. And some more pictures. There's the Rideau Canal, the Chateau, and then the Parliament building is off to the right. So another nice picture of that. Like I said, you get great views from across the river, and this is one, well, I don't know, I was going to say one real difference from Westminster in London, but you can get good views of Westminster from across the Thames too. And there's the Ottawa River. The sun was starting to go down, and it was made for some good pictures, I guess is the best way I can put it. And just another picture of that across the river. There is a monument to, who is this in this monument? I'll have to zoom, hold on, I have to zoom in here. A monument to, who is this? Samuel de Champlain is the monument to him, and it's up on top of the hill, and somebody wrote pillager here. Someone was anti-colonial and wrote that there, but he's like up on a hill looking back at the Parliament building, basically. And that's a shot of the bridge, and there's the Museum of Civilization across the river. There's another view of the Parliament building from right next to the Champlain statue. This little guy, I don't know what this was. Somebody said that they thought this was a beaver. I don't think this is, but it's some kind of little beaver-like animal that was running around. He was just on the grass in the park. It was pretty big. It was over a foot long, I'd say. Pretty big. This is where I got some food. A little place that served Chinese food, just to take a picture. And maybe it was, I guess it was Taiwanese food. And then the title of the place was Wong's Noodle House. So, little thing with chicken and noodles. Was quite good, by the way. Just went ahead and took that picture. Then finally, a couple more pictures here in another park. This is in Victoria Park. There's a statue here, which is like something with First People / with native Canadian wildlife. Another one of these totem poles. A little amphitheater outdoors. And here's the City Hall in Ottawa. Looks nothing like the City Hall in Toronto. Completely different style of building. Much more modern and functional looking. A couple last pictures of the Rideau Canal. This is, of course, in the evening. This was probably about 8 p.m. at this point. Sun was going down. Just a nice picture of that. The University of Ottawa was very close to where I was staying, so just a picture of that. I did not have time to walk around the University of Ottawa. I was pretty tired by now since I had been up since 6 a.m. and drove for 4.5 hours and then walked around for about 10 hours after that. But this is where I stayed, Ottawa International Hostel. The Ottawa International Hostel is inside a former jail. It's a reconstituted prison. Yes, I'm not making that up. A reconstituted prison that was used. And they actually did execute people here. They executed somebody here in 1869. It became a hostel in 73. So it's been a hostel for a while. But if you look at the architecture, yes, you can clearly see it's a former prison with all the bars and everything. By the way, this is where I was able to park my car fortunately. I was able to park at the hostel. So this is the entrances to the various floors. You go in this door, which is a very heavy door. And then here's where you stay. These are the jail cells. You stay in the jail cell. This is what it looks like on the inside, and this is where you stay. So yeah, it's an interesting experience. Now, this is not the first time I stayed in a prison, a converted prison, I should say. There's a converted prison in Stockholm as well, and I stayed in that one too. Another hostel that's a converted prison in Stockholm, and I stayed in that one as well. So not the first time that I've done that. And it does make for an interesting experience. By the way, it's also quite cheap. It's only about $35 to stay here, and that's not a bad deal. So there we go. We got through 3 days, and the video is run for about 75 minutes. So I think that's all we're going to have time for in this particular installment. So we're going to have to do more of these. If people like, now if this was bored you to tears, then tell me and I won't do more of these. I won't bother. But people said they wanted to see the pictures, so that was the first 3 days of vacation, and they were quite busy. Just a quick administrative thing. We will still be doing the YouTube League of Legends games on Wednesdays. That'll be coming up, I think, tomorrow or tomorrow after this video gets posted. And I'm going to be looking to do, we're getting closer to the end of Season 3 in League of Legends. I'm going to be looking to stream League of Legends ranked games solo queue, in addition to our team that plays weekly on Mondays. Be looking to start streaming solo queue. No set schedule for that, whenever I have time, whenever I feel like it. But you should see some of that. I'm a support main. I'm going to be looking to main support and just play for fun. Hopefully, I think I have a good chance of getting to gold. And we'll see where we go from there. But I do think I've gotten better. And if you want to follow when that is, you should probably just subscribe to the Twitch channel, LC Sullla. You should just subscribe to that because you'll get a notification when the streaming starts. Okay? Alrighty, hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you've been enjoying your weeks thus far. And hope that this video was interesting enough. You guys requested it, so here it was. Anyway, until next time, see you later. Have a great week. Take care.